did an event really happen if there's no footage or photos of it? That's kind of the esports version of if a tree falls in a forest and there's no one around to hear it, I suppose. But in a way, photographers and videographers, as well as writers, are documenting the future history of esports. They play a very big role. So today I'm joined by one of the leading photographers in the space, who we shall call Steph for this. I know you've got an in-game name like most people in esports, but we'll go with Steph. So firstly, thank you for taking the time to speak to little old me. I know you're a photography superstar.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thanks to everyone who tagged me in the post as well that wanted to hear what I have to say. That was overwhelming, but it was really, really nice.
Yeah, I wasn't kind of expecting responses for like 10 hours afterwards as well. I thought like I put it out and we get like 3 or 4 people tagged. But is it weird for you being in front of the camera?
A little bit. I think I actually prefer being in front of the camera video wise more than photo wise, to be honest. Strangely enough.
Right.
But over time, I've gotten used to it. Like I've done a few like interviews and podcasts and stuff, so I've eased
Mhm.
up to it more and more, which feels really good.
Good stuff. Well, so we'll get like the basic stuff that you've probably answered 15 times out of the way now, just to I guess set a bit of a foundation for it. But like, how long have you been working in esports and taking photos in esports?
Um, I'd say I started sort of at the end of 2014, escalated in 2015, and then 2016 is when I actively started going international to events and stuff. And that
Okay.
was very much me writing to TOs going, hey, I see you have an event. Can I show up and take pictures? That was literally it. Like I was
Right.
traveling with friends, so it was like we would travel together, pay for tickets, accommodation, and I would just show up and do my thing.
Okay, lovely stuff. And were you big into photography prior to working in esports, or was it one of the ones where you liked gaming and esports, and then brought kind of a passion, I guess, profession to that? I
Yeah.
should say.
No, not at all. So my background was I was studying something called digital data strategy and like involved in marketing, things like that. So my opportunity with DreamHack was actually with the social media team. And when I was on
Right.
that team, I realized, for good social media and marketing, you need really good content. And I was at the time also working with other volunteer photographers, and I felt super inspired by what they were able to deliver. So I was thinking, what can I do to achieve that? Because like I don't want to sit and wait for someone to edit their photos. I know what I want. I know what I need. So
Hmm.
that kind of became a gateway to get started and test it out on my own.
Oh wow, self-starter. That's good. A lot of people seem to wait for opportunities to arise, but a lot of the people that are really well established in esports now, obviously, were doing it back in the day and kind of created their own
Mhm.
opportunities. So it's inspiring to hear that always. And of course, there are like a bunch of different types of esports photography. When it's like player profiles where they're near enough always straight faced, like crossing their arms, and obviously is the like fancy dynamic like esports photography at events with the big crowd shots and stuff. So like, do you have like a specialty or at least a favorite? Would you say?
I've actually realized I do have like a favorite and a niche for what I do. So I don't, to be honest, I don't think there's any photographer that likes media day. So players walk in, they're grumpy. Oh, I have to do the esports pose. No one wants to
Yeah.
do the media day. And even when you do the fun stuff, it's a whole thing. That's not why we're there. We are literally there because we want the energy of the crowd and the players and the screams. Like that's exactly what we do. Now, for me, I realized I don't want to say I like doing portraits, but I like taking pictures of people, which sounds very generic, but in a sense of an example is for Blast, they do these like incredible walkouts, right? Now, when working with my team, it's pretty much the mentality of like, okay, do we want to go wide to get the whole thing, the spectacle, or do we want to get close up in the pit kind of and get the players walking out? I love getting the players walking out close up with like a 50 millimeter or something like that. While other photographers that I work with are like, I want to go wide. And recently at Blast Lisbon, I was working with Zhao, and we were talking about it. And I said, I gotta confess, dude, I really like doing the close up player shots. And he goes, perfect, because I don't like doing those. I'll do the wide shot. So for me, it's very much like tight shots of players. That's my go to thing. While other people prefer, like you said, more of the wide angle spectacle thing of it all. And I think obviously everyone touches upon that, but yeah, getting in personal, that's my thing.
And the both, well, like both styles are obviously important and are used heavily, whether it's a profile picture on Twitter or like the featured image on articles. You know, like as many almost generic crowd shots that are used when there's just not quite a better featured image to use. You know, what I mean, if you're writing something about the esports industry at large, whether it's like set to hit X amount of revenue in 2022, you'll just use like a crowd shot or something like that, where you can't quite tell what the
There's
event
always a
is,
like
just
specific
to
one. I
fill in
think
the
it's from
blanks.
Cologne or something. It's literally like wide angle audience, red light, blue light, crowded, and it's like the most generic esports photo you've seen. But the thing is, even though you get tired of seeing it, that's also what we have to think about when you do these shoots. It's like, okay, I am a creative and I want to try new things, but what will actually work for the client? Like, how can they adapt it to articles, press releases, advertisements, TV, like anything? So it's important to try those things out, even if it's generic.
Right, and are they heavy on trying to emphasize or influence the kind of shots you take while you're there then, or
Um,
is it mostly up to trusting your vision since you're the
Yeah, I
boss?
think they trust because they with myself and a lot of people they hired, we all there's like a red thread or common theme on how we shoot. So we have the mindset of like what does the client actually want, which is super nice because then you when you work with certain people, you know that they will deliver consistently as well with you. The problem with that
Hmm.
is, again, as a creative, sometimes you do want to try do different stuff. So, for example, for a trophy shot, you got to take a risk. Like, am I going to do the classic front wide angle thing, or should I try something different from afar or from behind? So, it's kind of a challenge, but overall, the client generally they know what they want and what we can deliver. So, very rarely do they ever step in and ask of anything that we haven't done before.
Okay. And how many photos would you say you take over the course of like a standard event? Say like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. How many would you say you take? Because we see on the public end dozens, I'm sure, but I'm sure you don't just take the perfect shot every single time.
No, so I wanna say roughly maybe like 3,000, which is gonna sound I don't know, do you think that sounds like a lot or a little?
I was expecting a few thousand,
Mhm.
so it's still a lot,
Yeah.
obviously, but I imagine there's a lot of almost duplication
Yes,
there,
for sure.
where because you want to be taking lots of like if you're doing the close-ups, they could be blinking at one point. So if you take a few more things like that, I imagine.
So, the reason I ask is because I know that there's definitely gonna be some people listening to this going, "Oh, 3,000, what an amateur," because I have so many friends, so many people who overshoot like crazy, and it's always like a funny bullying thing where they shoot like twice as much as me.
Right.
So that's why I was asking from your perspective, because 3,000 does sound like a lot and, technically is. I mean, you're not gonna take 3,000 with your iPhone, you know? But generally, I
No.
would say about 3,000. It can go up and down depending on what can be delivered. Because after a while, as well, depending on the event, there's only so many pictures you can get of like the standard player staring at the screen because not all of them are screaming all the time. So,
No. You got to balance that out. But
exactly.
yeah, I don't know. Like I don't know. Friends will maybe take like 12 pictures of their coffee. So like that's about it. But I understand like they're not quite as professional. So like no, I fully did expect it to be a lot. And how would you go about whittling that down? Because I assume you have to do like the editing
Yep.
of photos yourself as well if it's not up to scratch straight away.
Exactly. So my process is take the photos, upload it to Lightroom, and then I just go through my selects. And sometimes you know exactly what photo you're after, and you can kind of rush to it, start editing it, like a trophy shot, for example, or a really, really
Okay.
cool moment, and then you whittle it down. And then you over time, I almost do like layers of selection. So you can rate things in Lightroom between 1 and 5. So, for example, I'll rate the first
Okay.
picks 5, and then I'll go through all the 5s, narrow them down to 3s, and then ultimately choose the ones to select. So it kind of go slowly, slowly down so that I don't get any duplicates, and I make sure that I get exactly what I want. And sometimes duplicates can be okay, but overall, I want to deliver something unique every day if possible.
Got you. And say you're whittling down through 3,000 photos, then how long does that process take? Because that seems like a almost unspoken about, or at least unseen from the outside view, like aspect of the job. It's not quite done when you leave the arena on the Sunday
Yeah.
evening slash early hours on Monday morning,
No,
probably.
exactly.
So like that must. be almost as time consuming as the event, if not more? Right?
Actually it goes quite quickly because the thing is you just do kind of a rotation of like you go out, you shoot, you go back, you dump, you edit.
You do it at the time, right?
Exactly. Because realistically, the most things will be happening when the match starts and when it ends, or when it goes to a different map or anything like that. So you do have some time in between to edit, and that's your golden hour to
Mm.
do it because, like you said, if it's the end ends at the event ends at 2 a.m. You have 3,000 photos. That's a lot of photos to go through, and the reason for that as well is because usually the client wants to have assets for social media. So you kind of have to be on par with the social media needs of the client.
Wow. So there's not too much to think about then. Jesus Christ, that's yeah. It's not something I could ever do. I'd say that I'd get lost. I'd just be like, I'd be distracted just taking photos the entire time of awful
I
photos at
mean,
that because I'm not
sometimes
very
it will
good.
go so fast you don't have time to edit, honestly. So that's like another aspect of it all is some TOs will be able to have like a team of three. I think three is a magic number for any TOs listening. Three is a golden number
Okay.
for a photo team for a big event. But if you're soloing a huge event by yourself, chances are you will not have time to edit that, even if with the fastest computer. So you kind of have to balance it out depending on the circumstances.
Got you. I want to delve into that a little bit then. Why three? Because my uneducated brain tells me if there were six people there, you've got a higher chance statistically or probability wise of getting better photos, which is subjective. But you know what I mean, there'd be more photos and thus presumably
Yeah,
better ones.
exactly. I think three is good because I would say the esports photo community is kind of niche and small. Three is a good dynamic so that it doesn't become too much. For example, during a trophy shot, then you make sure that one person takes a generic front photo, one person takes it from the back, and the a third person can get a little bit more creative with what they want to do. Same thing
Right.
with if they're just doing a regular group stage, for example. Two people can be shooting, one does the winner, one does the loser, and then the third one could be either doing a crowd shot or even editing. So with three people, you constantly know you will always have someone out there to capture those moments. And I think as well, when you have three, specifically with the winner loser scenario, you don't miss out on the crowd reactions. So it's like this perfect dynamic of coverage, I'd say.
Okay. And what are the like favorite events for you to shoot yourself? Like I was on your website and there seemed to be a lot of
Mhm.
FGC events going about. So like which ones would you say are your favorites and why?
Well, FGC will always have a special place in my heart, and those are definitely, I'd say, the most intensive events because there's no structure in a sense that there is with other things like Dota or Counter Strike, where it's a bit more like you need to be done by this point. You know what I mean? So FGC is more free flowing, and I feel like there's just a lot going on in terms of not just what's happening on stage, but these tournaments are usually, anyone can show up and make an upset. So these can go on for a very long time. Someone can come out of the blue and knock out the best player. And I think that's super appealing to me. And I love that because it's also, those photos aren't maybe not the most glamorous. It's like a poorly lit, crappy convention lighting, but it could also be super duper historic. So FGC events are always going to be super top tier. And I've been shooting a lot of Counter Strike recently, and also that's been just like fantastic. The lighting is, no one can complain about the lighting, but also I think with timeline of how some of the stories are developing with certain teams and dynamics and changes and stuff like that, it's really cool to like be a part of that journey. And I mean, even 6 months has changed so much with how some rosters are lined up and how some of these storylines are.
Hmm.
So being part of that like adds a different dynamic to it all, actually. So yeah, FGC and Counter Strike are my two go to as of now.
Got you. And FGC is typically one versus one, right? As well. I admittedly don't follow fighting games. It's the weak area in my knowledge, but that seems to be one person versus
Mhm.
one person, and I guess and they're sat close to each other all the time. So I guess you can actually see more of the
Oh, for
rivalry there
sure.
versus like two sets of five players like across a stage from each other. You can get like the up close and more personal
Exactly. It's like
shots,
the
I guess.
head-on thing, which in itself is a challenge because let's say it's the last game, last life, all this stuff. Who do you focus on? Because at some point you are going to be
Mm.
behind the screen because you don't want to distract them. So at that moment you have to kind of choose who to focus on. And then at that point, hearing is so important because like hearing in the knowledge of the players is so important because you can hear who they're cheering for and then decide, okay, that's my go-to guy. or girl to
Right.
focus on. So yeah, it's challenging, but it's also like a super fun thing to see two people react because it's so intense, right? Because you can't look away. You will. Nothing would feel worse for you than losing and then seeing your opponent smash their controller out of joy because they destroyed you. You know,
Hmm.
so
That's true. That's true. And shifting gears a little bit. So anyone can pick up a camera. We've all basically got like pretty decent cameras on our phones at this point. So what makes a good photographer? Because I imagine if we had the same subject and were tasked to both take photos of it, yours would turn out 50 times better than mine.
what makes a good photo? I would say
Maybe a
it is
tough
a
one
tough
for you.
one. I
I'm
would
sorry if it
say
is.
the first thing that actually comes to mind is knowing the lore behind the game itself and the players, because when you have that knowledge, you're able to time perfect moments. With like, for example, there was a player walkout I did once, saw his girlfriend in the crowd, knew it was his girlfriend, and then I knew, okay, he's gonna give her a kiss, and they did. And everyone's like, "Oh my god, how did you know that?" It's like it just observational knowledge. So yeah, that's actually the first thing that
Big
comes to
brain.
mind because no matter like literally even with your phone, if you see something cool, you notice that this is important, like a dad hugging his son or whatever, that will mean so much more than the quality of the photo itself. Quality matters, sure, but ultimately it's about that knowledge and the setup of everything going on.
Right. So would you say like understanding the game and the competitive scene around it is another like unseen part of the
Yeah,
job that takes up part of the
for
time,
sure.
and that's obviously not going to be paid itself, but you get paid for your knowledge while taking the photos. So that's another part that's time
Mhm.
intensive, but isn't necessarily
Yeah,
seen.
100%. Because at that point as well, you'll know a game that might just seem like just the game to someone could be a make or break for someone's career. And if you have that knowledge, you know their background or a glimpse of it, you can make history with that one photo.
Awesome stuff. Awesome. And are there any more like unseen elements then? Because obviously, like if you think of casters and such, right, the amount of time they have to put into put all the stats
Mhm.
together and contextualize things and create narratives. That's insane within
Yeah.
itself. And I'm sure that there are probably some more for yourself as well as editing and obviously staying on top of the narratives as
Yeah,
well.
there's definitely a mini component to that, and I can say, like, to some degree, some casters, analysts, or hosts, whatever, will do like a breakdown of like events coming up, and it's super important to like observe that and see what you can take from it. So Lucy, for example, for ESL Impact that I did recently in Valencia, did like a stories to watch or players to watch thread on Twitter, and I found that super helpful to get an idea of like what do I need to look out for, what's going to be super important or valuable, both to the
Mm,
players, to myself, but also the client.
awesome stuff. And right, the advice portion. So for those who are potentially looking to kind of break into this side of the industry, there's a lot to go on here, I
Mhm.
think, because I don't think it's as simple as turning up to an event with a camera and going, "Here we go, I'm now an esports photographer" by any means. So like, what are your like instant recommendations for just getting started and making a name for yourself? Is it? I assume it's not trying to get booked for a really high paid
Mhm.
job instantly. Would you say start small at events
Yeah,
or?
definitely. I'd say the biggest thing you can do for yourself is start local. So if you already have a scene, reach out to your TOs, reach out to your friends, or even just like yeah players, and see if you can show up and take some photos of them. Experiment a little bit. Like my first 2 years traveling again, everything was out of my own pocket, and I just showed up to take photos, and I went with my friends, so it became like a thing. I didn't go to these events with the focus of becoming an esports photographer. I did it because it made me happy, and also seeing the happiness I could provide other people by capturing these moments meant so much to me. So if you have that in the back of your head, I think you can go a long way because you will understand its importance for yourself, and your friends as well. And then it kind of builds on that. So start local for sure because those are the easiest. Even DreamHack, I think before there was like a volunteer group for the social media and the photo team. I still think they have it,
Right.
but it's definitely getting more and more difficult. So, your first attempt at esports photography might not be IEM Cologne. Maybe not. I'm not sure what the security guidelines are on bringing the camera. You can, and if you can, you should, but don't like bet on it. And also, know your worth, but also be aware that, if you're just starting out, if you're not quite sure what you're doing, you can't charge the highest rate for everything. You really have to build yourself up.
No.
Don't do stuff for free for someone else. If you're going to do something free, you do it for yourself.
Okay, so you would never say like volunteer positions to benefit these big entities that are well funded
If
per
they're
se.
well, no, yeah, if they're well funded, you know that they can pay and they can afford something. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be, you don't have to pay your rent completely, but contribute in a
No.
way.
Okay. Yeah, because like coming from writing, so obviously another side of the creative sphere, I wrote 1,000 pieces before I ever got paid for anything, and that was all for myself though, on like my own
Yeah.
website, just to get the
Hmm.
reps in. Now, if I was writing for a website at that time, I wouldn't expect a lot anyway because I was new to it and weren't very good. But I certainly wouldn't have accepted nothing because they're benefiting in some way from the work you produce, right? And I think that's the same across basically any kind of vocation or kind of hobby you're trying to monetize and turn into something more
Yeah,
serious.
exactly. And sometimes it's even just the principle of saying, "Hey, we can offer you, a couple $100 or whatever," to know that they're not just exploiting you. And I'm not saying everyone is. Some volunteer positions are truly volunteer, but other organizations, they can afford it. You know that their CEOs or whatever are having a steak dinner with all their clients, and that could technically go to you for the hard work you're putting in. And especially I'd say, I mean, bias, but with photos, that stuff lasts forever. You can use those assets forever. So it's absolutely worth every penny to give something for that type of work.
I agree entirely. And how important is gear, especially when you're starting out? Because my understanding of lenses and cameras are they are not necessarily cheap if you want the good stuff.
That is correct. I don't want to say way too much money because it's definitely worth every penny. I spent a lot of money on my first mirrorless, so a Canon R6. Um, they'll be arriving next week. So it is important. It is not the basis of everything though, like especially when you're starting out and you're new, just get something, get the best you can for your budget and test it out. I've seen people with some like raggedy setups, gear, that have achieved so much, and it's almost like there's a charm to it too, like to not be perfect. So going back to like the advice with importance of like knowing the lore and the moments, that will value so much more than gear. But gear obviously, I mean, I wouldn't shell out as much money as I did on this camera if I didn't think it would benefit me in a way. But in a way, there was this war between shooting Canon or shooting Sony, and I was debating getting a Sony. And
Right.
then I had a friend say, like, "Dude, why are you even thinking about this? You've literally won awards with the gear that you have." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that's true." So
Like, what's the basis of that war? Is it just like the Apple Android war?
pretty much, I would definitely say it's the same thing. And like, granted, Sony does have a lot of perks, and I'm willing to try it 100%. It's just a matter of like, it's a lot of money to just switch out your kit entirely. So even that, like, if there's anyone listening who's like, "Oh, I don't have that much money, but I have a Canon, but I heard Sony's really good." If you cannot afford it, then just keep rocking with what you have. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. What matters is the photos you actually produce, and the quality of that will increase with the gear in terms of grain and things like that. But it's not the make or break because you can still deliver great photos if you just have the eye for it.
Got you. And is Sony the Apple in this analogy where they're the more expensive one? Then, yeah, is that the case?
um, It depends really. It goes up and down depending on the
Right.
lenses itself because you have, mirrorless lenses that are native and all this stuff. I would say it's a tough one. Depends on really who you ask.
Got you. And so is there like a perfect starter kit setup that you could recommend then, or does that entirely matter based on the kind of photos they're trying to take?
Depends on the kind of photos you're trying to take, and I'm gonna be real, I am, like, the least technical photographer in the entire world. So when people ask me, like, "Hey, what should I get?" I'm like, "I don't know." Go to Flickr, find a photographer you like, see what they're shooting, find the closest thing to that. Keep it simple.
That's not bad advice at
It gets
all,
the job
because
done.
then you can
That's what
actually
I do.
see this is what you could do if you were good. So get this and then work
Yeah,
hard.
exactly. That's pretty much it because, you're not
Work
always
towards
gonna
that.
get the crème de la crème, but you can get halfway there.
No, got yeah. It's a scary one for me because I think like I don't think there are that many jobs in esports where gear matters that
Mhm.
much. Obviously, actually competing itself, like you want the top spec PC if you can, so you have the maximum frame rate and all that kind of stuff. But like if you're writing, it doesn't matter if you're using a £12 like Dell keyboard or some mechanical six, like you know what I mean, like one that costs like $200. That doesn't matter too much. So when I think about like photography, like oh, I could spend 4, 5, 6 grand, I don't know how
Mhm.
much, on this kit, and then never make it. Like it's a hefty investment up front, even if you go for a start one, which could be like 1 or 2 grand or
Yeah,
something,
for
right?
sure, and I think, like, it obviously
That's
is
scary
it's
to
super
me.
scary, but in relation to, like, what you do, so, for example, the laptop I'm on now is also quite new. I would have never dished out this much money for a laptop when I was starting out because my laptop got the job done. It wasn't my main income. So it just, that's what mattered. Now, recently,
Hmm.
I got this laptop because I realized my old one was slowing me down immensely. Like at some point, I would not edit some photos because it would take way too long and I needed to focus on like the most important shots. And that sucked. And that
Right.
really hurt me because I don't want to I don't wanna have to do that, you know? If I take a photo I'm proud of, I wanna be able to edit it and not have to pick and choose based on what my computer can handle or not, because it would, like, freeze up or anything like that. So, in that sense, when it becomes your bread and butter and more important, then, it will affect the quality of not your work, but your delivery, right? So how quickly can you get up a trophy shot? Will it take 2 minutes or will it take 10? And that will make a huge
Hmm.
difference.
Very true. And still on the gear side, but going towards like software. So I've been paying a subscription to Photoshop for years, and Lightroom comes with that, right? So Lightroom is not a free program. You have to pay for Photoshop to get that,
Correct.
right? So if someone doesn't quite have the resources yet to be able to shell out, I don't know, however much it is, $10 or something a month
Mhm.
for that, or are not willing to do so, are there any like free pieces of software out there which will at least guide them towards the right direction that you're aware of?
Um, Depends if we're talking.
I imagine not like Paint, Microsoft Paint or something is probably not
Yeah, you can use
not
like
the best.
GIMP or something. I've actually never gone that route of free tools, so unfortunately, I'm
Okay,
clueless on that in that regard. I was lucky enough to get
okay.
a Creative Cloud subscription through my school. So, if you could
Mm.
do a part-time class, I will allow you some subscription like that as a student, and that can help you out immensely. I think mine was like for 2 years, and that was a huge, huge help.
Not bad. I've just I don't know. I use Photoshop just to like mess about with featured images and stuff. So like I'm not a super creative guy in that sense, and I dread to think how much I've spent on that as a non-designer, non-photographer and stuff, you know. But it's worth its weight in gold when your things just pop up and you need to just remove
Oh,
something or
yeah,
anything, you
100.
know. But like, yeah, I've never been a student like of a university or anything, so I've literally just paid for it this entire time. Um, and I know some professionals in the industry don't pay for it, but have not got it via the student way, and I would not recommend that whatsoever.
Yes.
Of course, that's not something I personally endorse, and nor Steph, I'm sure we keep it strictly
Exactly.
professional on that
Yes.
front. So how to make a good impression on clients like that? Is there like a political game you have to play to like secure jobs? Would you say like especially maybe starting out now you're well known, you've won like hundreds of awards, I'm sure. So now they'll probably be coming to you more, and maybe some long term relationships. But early on, like how do you kind of get the ball rolling there?
So initially, like I said, I would just show up to tournaments and talk to TOs and see where my friends would take me with those connections. And then it's really about networking, about who you know at these events. So
Hmm.
funnily enough, so Helena Christiansen is obviously one of the best, and like she's been doing this the longest. I had actually never worked with her previously, but she used to lead the photography team. Sorry, at DreamHack. Now, a few years after I began, or maybe a year or so, she was actually a connection for like Inferno Online here. They had some esports tournaments stuff. So I just reached out to her, like almost like a cold call. I was like, "Hey, I've done some DreamHack work. I want to do this event. I heard you're the connection," and then kind of build on that. So it's about reaching out and saying like, "This is what I can offer you." So obviously have as solid as a portfolio as you can, and then go from there and just reach out to people and talk to them and say like, "Hey, this is what's up," because that is sure people might hire who they work with before, their friends, but overall it won't hurt you at all to reach out. And I'd say also A courtesy thing is if you want to reach out to a TO, maybe me or anyone else usually shoots for them or so, it's really respectful to write to who is like the main photographer and go like, hey, are you shooting this? Do you need a second shooter? And just like work on that instead of trying to compete or undercut. Because when you do that, it just ruins it for everyone.
That's what I was going to say. Like, networking with people is obviously very valuable, but if you're networking with people who would both be allies and also
Mhm.
competition for you, that must be a weird dynamic unless you all kind of treat it with
Yeah.
respect and like a knowing like the set of rules that you go
For
by.
sure. I'd say like me and the people I most commonly work with, or even just like friends I haven't worked with, we all usually agree on certain rates with certain clients and what they can expect and deliveries and things because we all want to be on the same page, and we don't want to ruin this for anyone else. Even like beginners, we know you can't start off with the same rates as someone that's been doing this for years. But we're more than, at least I can speak for myself. I'm more than willing to give advice on rates, and topics like that, even for events or even single photos, because I think it's super important that we have a consistent, um, yeah, consistent rate for everyone so that we can all continue to do this and not go poor, especially in this economy. So,
But like thinking about it there, so people almost have to like if you want to get into this, you have to almost not break in, but work your way into this group that's been around for a long time, this community of photographers to like understand the lay of the
yeah,
land.
and I mean, I'm biased because I guess I'm already in, or I got in there like through my years of work. But I mean, my DMs are open. A lot of other photographers' DMs are open as well. I'm pretty garbage at answering them. I'm not gonna lie, but I am.
They're open, but don't message me because you're not getting
Yeah,
a reply.
exactly. Or like I'm more than happy to talk to people who walk up to me at events and ask me the same things. So it's just reach out and don't be afraid, because the worst thing you can do is undersell yourself and disrupt like the landscape, I guess you could say. So a lot of us are more than happy to help out.
Because there has been a lot of drama over the years with like broadcast
Mhm.
talent, like undercutting and the kind of they're friends, but they're also competition at the end of the day. They're all fighting for limited amount of spots at
Yep.
events, and thus some people think, oh, you know what? If I go 200 quid or like $200 cheaper a day, I'm going to get picked, and then I'm going to have this job. But that doesn't seem to work out for them in the long run.
No, and
So it's almost better to just kind of play the game and wait your
yeah.
turn if you're not quite getting picked for
And I
everything yet.
think clients notice that as well. Like, there's a lot of clients who knows like, okay, this person works well in a team, this person does not. And I think it reflects on yourself as well. When you undercut, Teal's going to go, oh, great, I saved money. But this might also affect the quality. They might also think in that regard, like, okay, what does everyone else think? Because if you're eventually going to have to work in a team and they know that you've been undercutting, it kind of creates a weird environment. Now, the client obviously has nothing to do with it. As long as you do your job, you do your job. But it is a bit iffy, I would say. Like, why are you different from the rest of them? What's the catch?
Got you right, and that's an interesting one. I'm going to think on that because I didn't realize it was as clicky as it is. Not using that in a
Mhm.
derogatory way by any means, but yeah, that's interesting. I guess it's the case like esports started out just as a bunch of different communities, and that's effectively what it is now,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, it
And
makes
there's
sense.
also
And
like, before I forget as well, there's also an esports
mm,
photography Discord where like all
okay,
levels of experience and backgrounds are there to talk about gigs, to talk about rates. I can maybe like link it somehow, for anyone who's listening who'd be curious about that. And there's also like, they're super, super helpful.
okay, and then people can find that by like they could probably ask while they're
Yeah.
networking and trying to make connections, right? That's the
Yeah.
kind of thing. Then they can go in there and make a name for themselves. But like, would you recommend that um, photographers, maybe not pro yet, but like they're working their way up, that they go above and beyond? So like they deliver twice as many photos as maybe you'd expect, and they're all edited and you know what I mean? Like just going above and beyond different ways and getting things sent super quick and working overtime to get it done. Because while that is good, and I'm sure the client will be like, oh wow, this photographer is really good. Like they're going above and beyond, they're doing great. I'd normally pay this amount and get much less. But also then I think you kind of create like an expectation upon yourself that that's the level you
Yeah.
perform at. So if you ever in at a later date perform less than that, then it seems like you're underperforming, even though you may actually just be performing like on
Yeah,
par.
definitely. I mean, I think that goes for any job. So even when I was doing marketing, there's one
Mm.
job I had where I would work until I would start at 9 and then I would end like 2, 3 in the morning because I wanted to show how
Mm-hmm.
good I was. I want to show how committed I was.
Yeah.
And then I had an old coworker who would say, you're making that the expectation. You're making that the norm. So when
Mm-hmm.
you take time off, when you go 9 to 5 instead, they're going to go, oh, Steph's slacking. So, don't do that. I mean, to it's not entirely bad in a way of like, for example, I have a client I worked with recently this year. Never worked with them before. I went in, I over delivered. They were at the end of it, they were like, dude, these are too many photos. You know what I mean? And I was
Got
like,
you, yeah.
cool. Then I know that. Then I've set the bar of like what I can deliver if they need it to. But then we met in the middle and be like, okay, cool. This is what you can actually get. I think it's also
Right.
important, not just in terms of delivery and edit, but also your raw photos are super important as well. Like you should not just give them out for free. Because when you give out a raw photo, that gives a client opportunity to edit it the way they want, use it the way they want. I mean, it's the full high res everything, and that becomes
Mm-hmm.
problematic. So managing what you actually
Okay.
deliver is super important. Also, is in conjunction with your rate. So some clients I work with pay for all that. They get the raws, they get everything. Some of them only want like the social media JPEG size. So it's a matter of managing expectations. But when it's a new client, of course you want to show off a bit, you know.
Mm-hmm. But you just got to be kind of careful with it.
Exactly.
Cause I remember when I took my first full time job in the industry, it was like editor of Esports Insider, like the business publication. So I was like managing a team of like 10 freelancers or something, and it was a 9 to 5 job. But I was probably working like 16 hours or so, getting paid for half of that. And that was always been available on Discord and always been available to edit, or if some news needs doing quickly, I'll just hop on do it
Mhm.
myself, and that made me feel like I was truly on top of it and overperforming. But yeah, it was just like, well, that's not expected of me. So when I dropped it a bit, it wasn't explicitly said to me, but like I felt as if I was then letting them down or letting myself down, because then things that were being done before were waiting until the next day, and that feels like the end of the world. But then conversely, that created a ton of burnout because I was actually not performing that great during those 16 hours. If I worked 8 hours, and just 8 hours, I'd perform better within those eight than I would with double the
Yeah.
amount of time. So like you got to kind of balance that and not go too
Yeah, for
hard.
sure. And the mental
Um,
part is super important about that because, like I said, you work 16 hours. That's not 16 efficient hours versus 4
no,
efficient hours. And you just feel bad about it in the end. Like no one benefits from that. And I mean, it's
no.
also a common thing I noticed within esports or any freelancing really is that the double-edged sword is like we are so passionate, which means that we get shit done and we do great job. The problem is that we can go a bit overboard. If you're a perfectionist
Hmm.
or whatever, if you want to achieve something, you can do it a little bit too much. And it's important to take a step back, take a breather. I mean, even like from the esports photo case, even taking on too many clients. Sure, you want the grind, you want the hustle, you want all that money, but at the same time, like, what does that mean if you're completely like near a mental breakdown at the end of a month
Yes.
because you didn't take time off to rest and heal up? So it's super important to have that in mind that it's not all about overperforming and shining bright. Like you need to rest as well.
No, for sure. And I'm trying to convince Hitmarker that if they let me work 1 hour a day, I will get so much done in that 1 hour that it will outshine, the 8 I do normally. But I'm yet to make that
Yeah,
case
it's
convincing
a
enough.
tricky.
But like the kind of grind culture is like persistent in esports, though it is dying down. There's about once a year there's a clip from like Optic Hex on a podcast where he says like you need to work 24/7, 365 to make this work. Esports doesn't sleep. Your competitors, yeah, they may sleep, but if you don't, you'll get ahead. And everyone's like, "Oh my god, this is sick!" And I'm like, "Yeah, in theory, it makes sense. If you work more hours, then yeah, you're going to produce more work and presumably outwork the competition to the point where you're better than them. But you're also creating an early grave for yourself. You're gonna you're gonna be producing lackluster work versus what you could do well rested,
Exactly, and it's
and
like for
everything
what?
else.
Like
So mm,
something that's similar to that is so recently, um, almost a few days from now, it's been a month since I quit my full-time job within marketing. Um, you.
Congratulations, by the
I'm
way.
super happy right now. It was a great choice. But before that, so my entire esports career until a month ago, I was working a marketing job parallel with my esports photography.
Oh wow.
It was
Okay.
like full-time stuff, super intense. I I don't know. I thrive under pressure. I thought it was fun for a while, but I didn't realize how it was affecting me in so many ways. So I was home recently for doing a little break before a tournament, and I was with my parents, and my mom took note of how nice it was that I was home. Like I was home with them. I was not working remote. I was not
Mm,
having a meeting at 3 in the morning. I was home with them, and they could see how much more relaxed I was. And in the grand scheme, in the bigger picture of life, that is so important, you know? So I am able to pay my bills. I'm able to take my parents out for a nice dinner, but also the time I spent with them instead of trying to, work 365, 24/7.
hmm
That is so much more valuable than anything, really.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, like it doesn't just affect your work in a positive way, like your personal life as well. You're actually a human again instead of just being professional photographer who's on 24/7 making it
Exactly.
work. So congratulations on that
Thanks.
move. And now you've just got the typical freelancer
Yeah.
worries,
Which
which I do not miss
I
whatsoever.
mean, it's a thing, but it's also like it's a fun new challenge for me as well. Like I'm enjoying it.
Mm,
I'm enjoying trying new stuff. Like just like okay, everyday invoicing or just managing clients, setting up flights, things like that. Those things take time as well. So
hmm
I think that it's underrated. You're not going to sleep until noon, maybe every day. I do a lot. I love sleeping a lot. But keeping that mentality of like, okay, I actually do have stuff to do.
Awesome stuff. Well, on that note, congratulations once again. I mean, obviously you deserve it. You've produced great work for years, so it's awesome that you can achieve more of a work life balance now. And also, thank you for coming on and speaking candidly. I'm sure there's a lot of people that will find a lot of value from this. An opportunity now for you to plug whatever you wish to
Whew.
plug
Well, thank you.
within
Within
reason, of
reason,
course.
within
Like
reason.
don't go too
Yeah,
wild.
thanks to everyone who tagged me for this post. This was super fun to be on, and thank you for having me. Yeah,
Okay.
my DMs are open if you have any esports photography questions. Um, you can get inspired by people, but don't compare yourself to others. That's like my biggest piece of advice to anyone listening that wants to get into it, or anyone now who's feeling super under pressure because they underdelivered or overdelivered. Like, yeah, just
hmm
chill.
I get you. And where can people find you online?
They can find me on my website, so vexanie.com. I mean, Google Vexanie and you'll find me. I've essentially branded that nickname. Good job. The
And
marketing
the,
paid
the link
off.
will be in
So
the descriptions as well. So they don't even have to do a Google search. They can just click a
exactly.
link.
So
So we will link there. So thank you again for taking the time. I appreciate it. And also everyone for watching/listening because we're on Spotify, Google, Apple, as well as YouTube now.